You can find the product featured in today's video and many more at Dan's Dinosaurs. Check out his site at the link in the description below, and be sure to mention that Killer Shrew Fan sent you. Now, on to the review. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Killer Shrew Fan's Killer Toy Reviews. Now, if there's one Ceratopsian that could potentially rival the emblematic Triceratops, it would easily be Styracosaurus. I feel like as a kid, I saw it almost as often as Triceratops in books and movies, and like Triceratops, it seems an obligatory addition for any company to make at some point or other. That's why when PNSO finally revealed their new for 2022 Styracosaurus, the only surprise to me was how long it took them to get to it. Although I was happy to see other less represented species getting their time in the limelight first. Anthony here came close on the heels of Genie the Centrosaurus, and both seemed to mark yet another shift in PNSO's artistic style. They had already improved the exaggerated scales on their theropods, and now it seemed the time had come to do the same for their Ceratopsians, as we now have these beautifully understated and wonderfully realistic skin details. I'm really excited to take a closer look at this thing, so let's jump right in. It's Killer Shrew Fan's Killer Toy Reviews, and this is Anthony, the Styracosaurus. Real quick, let's do a brief overview of the packaging. It's the same thing we've seen on all of the other prehistoric animal packages. You've got a glamour shot of the Paintmaster adorning the faces of the box, along with the title of the figure and PNSO's logo in orange on both sides in different languages. The top of the box features another angle of the Paintmaster, as well as the company's tagline of "Every life deserves respect." On top of Anthony himself, PNSO have also included a small booklet about the species and the production of the model that's just chocked full of images and simple sketches of the anatomical features of Styracosaurus. And then you do also get this single poster of a Styracosaurus in a charging position, and you know, I feel like this is a good amount of extras. I don't need dozens of posters of unrelated animals, as gorgeous as they are. Just a little booklet and one little poster if you must. That's enough for me. But anyway, that's it for packaging and the extras. Let's move on to the figure itself, and there you can get a nice 360-degree view of Anthony the Styracosaurus. The first thing I must comment on here is that I really appreciate the overall silhouette of the piece with the arched spine and overall robust and squat proportions. It really gives it a powerful appearance, and the hunched back plays off of that fan of spikes on the head quite well. And speaking of the head, let's go in for a closer look, shall we? Now, something I love about Styracosaurus in general is the sheer amount of morphological variation we see between specimens, specifically when it comes to the asymmetry of their ornamentation. This leaves room for a little more artistic license, as well as potential for some extra character between models. That being said, as Dino Screen pointed out in their review, this figure seems to follow the American Museum of Natural History specimen. I think it's number 5372 pretty closely. You can see that Anthony has got the fairly large forward projecting P1s and absent P2s, as well as the interesting treatment of the episquamosals and the inclusion of the nub-like growths over the orange eyes, making it a dead ringer for the head of that particular fossil specimen. As far as the detail work goes, it's nothing short of incredible, with pebbled scales of varying sizes adorning the entirety of the face, growing in size the closer you get to the nasal ridge and around the base of that slightly forward curved horn. There's also some very subtle skin folds bunching up around the nostrils, and the wrinkles of the mouth are all very well handled. I'm also glad there's no sign of that weird cheek seam line we got on the previous Centrosaurus here. It looks like the mouth is actually terminating with some buccal anatomy. What a concept. I do have a couple of qualms with the head of this figure, the most obvious being the fall off in the paint. It's certainly not as bad as we've seen on some of their past figures, and the broad strokes of the Paintmaster are still present. But the fall off does lead to a sort of running together of the features, particularly around the beak, where we don't see any separation from the keratin and the surrounding soft tissue. Then of course there's the markings on the frill, which are much more starkly painted here. I will say though, I can still appreciate that for what it is. It's a lot more bold and and graphic this way, which speaks to the whole display function of the frill, but it does come somewhat at the cost of realism. The weirdest area of decline on the figure, though, is with the horns. You can see the large nasal horn features these amazing cracks and ridges of growth that PNSO have been adding to their recent Ceratopsians. I love that detail, and the box seemed to promise more of it on the larger P3s and P4s of the frill, but for whatever reason, that detail is lost on the final product, and instead we just have these smooth projections, it's very disappointing in my book. I will admit, I love the colors here. The orange transitioning into that enamel yellow and the subtle gloss gives them a nice, believable appearance, but I do really wish the sculptural details of the Paintmaster's epiparietals were at least somewhat present here as well. So that's the business end of this Styracosaurus figure. Overall, I really do like it. The detail everywhere except the horns is so impressive, the paint is still quite nice even with the expected dip in complexity, and I appreciate the inspiration PNSO took from a unique and specific specimen. All told, it may very well be my favorite head on a PNSO Ceratopsian to date. As far as the rest of the sculpt goes, it's just as impressive, and as with many of PNSO's more recent works, shows a real perfection of the ideas we've seen on previous figures. As you can see, it falls somewhere between the prominently textured Ceratopsian figures released in 2020 and the much more simple and less defined work we see on Duke the Spinops from 2019. All of this works to show PNSO's continuing improvement to their already gorgeous sculpts, something we saw prominently with their theropods in 2021 and are now even getting on their Ceratopsians. As a general overview of the soft tissue, you can see lovely fine wrinkles and bunches of skin forming with the slight downward positioning of the head, and as you move onto the torso, you have got more skin folds forming against the gut as the limbs push up against the main frame of the figure. Conversely, on the opposite side where we see the legs bracing away from the torso, the skin has a more subtle pull to it. All of this has then been covered with extremely fine sandpaper-like scales, as well as larger feature scales that dot across the entire torso and down onto the tail. The tail itself is incredibly stubby, which I always love to see on Ceratopsian figures. Likewise, the limbs are incredibly robust. You can see just how stocky those thighs look and how they feed down into those bulging calves and thick ankles. The forelimbs are also quite well muscled and all feature some great folds of skin forming with the bending of the joints, and as the settling weight of the animal pushes the skin against the bracing ankles. A quick once-over of the underside shows some nice wrinkles forming in the gullet, and then once you hit the midsection you can see more rectangular chainmail-like scales covering the swell of the gut. And for those of you who care about such things, have no fear, a cloaca is here. Now onto the paint. This is certainly a double-edged sword. On one hand, we're unfortunately back to those earth tones with brown stripes. On the other, it's actually one of my favorite examples of this particular color scheme from PNSO's catalog. All of these transitions in color are handled beautifully, particularly concerning the subtle application and feathered edges of the brown markings along the dorsal region, although I am missing the white flashing seen in the promo images. I will say the colors are just overall much less vibrant than what we saw in the promotional shots, but since the general idea is maintained and the application is so pleasing almost everywhere, I'll give PNSO credit here and say it's another strong paint job for the price point. As far as the size of the model goes, you're looking at around 6.5 inches from tip of tail to tip of snout, or 16.5 centimeters, although you do get around 7 inches with the help of that nasal horn. Then to the tippy top of the P3s, you're looking at right around 4 inches off the ground, or just about 10 centimeters. Now, Styracosaurus was around 18 feet long in life, which would put this figure somewhere in the 133 scale range, which is close enough to 135 in my book. I'd rather them be just a little bigger than a little too small. Moving on to comparisons, my favorite part of any video, let's go ahead and start off with the plethora of other Styracosaurus figures from all the other companies. First up, here it is with the, shall I say, very outspoken PNSO Styracosaurus. A lot of character with that one. And then we have the recent Safari Ltd Styracosaurus. Next, here it is alongside the massive and ever-popular Cloaca offering, which you know if I have a Cloaca figure, it's gotta be pretty good. That, and I think this big beast is actually like $10 cheaper than PNSO's offering, so do with that what you will. Of course, gotta bring in the beasts of the Mesozoic Styracosaurus, and I gotta be honest, now that I have almost all of these figures, I will say this Styracosaurus is probably one of my least favorite due to its busy paint job. Luckily for me though, we'll be getting a fan's choice version in the style of Dead Sound's Old Buck, which if you haven't seen yet, do yourself a favor and go check out that entire series. It is an incredible achievement, and I just cannot wait to own something inspired by it. Anyway, back to Anthony. As a final Styracosaurus comparison, here it is alongside the old Batat Styracosaurus, and even with all of the competition, I always considered this to be the gold standard Styracosaurus figure, but I would be lying if I said PNSO wasn't giving it a run for its money here. Now for some other PNSO Ceratopsian comparisons. First up, here it is alongside the most recent release, the Centrosaurus Genie, and as excited as I was to get a Centrosaurus in model form, I do think the muddy paint job and higher price tag does deflate its charm somewhat. Anthony here is the same price, but he is slightly larger and the paint job is much more appealing, so he definitely feels the more worth it of the two. Then we have another American Museum friend. It's Doyle the Triceratops, which actually made my top 10 list of 2021. But despite how much I appreciate PNSO's updated Triceratops, I think it's safe to say I like Anthony here even more. Next up, we have Achi, the Sinoceratops, again showing how far PNSO have come when it comes to their detail work. And then we have Perez, the Machairoceratops, which is easily my least favorite Ceratopsian from PNSO yet. Anthony here is about $12 more, and I know people were questioning that price hike when these new Ceratopsians started rolling out, but seeing the two styles side by side, yeah, I think the extra $12 goes a long way in this case. And here's another look at Anthony alongside Brian, another cheaper offering, but it boasts the more garish sculpt work and less naturalistic color scheme. And finally, here it is with Duke the Spinops, and like I said earlier, this really shows how far PNSO has come in a couple of years alone. From a more simple sculpt, to exaggerated details, to some of the most realistic and believable integument I've seen on any figure in my collection. It really is an accomplishment. And there's a nice group shot of all of the figures together, and it's nice to see such a diverse lineup of figures from PNSO. Here's hoping they continue to add to it, but for now, I think it's safe to say that Anthony is my favorite of the bunch. Then, just for fun, here it is with a nice group shot of fellow Dinosaur Park formation friends. From left to right, you've got PNSO's Corythosaurus, Spinops, Styracosaurus, Centrosaurus, Lambeosaurus, and Parasaurolophus. Then to round out the formation, I went ahead and brought in the Safari Ltd Gryposaurus and Daspletosaurus, as well as the Batat, Edmontonia, and Euplocephalus. And then, of course, the Papogorgosaurus. I love being able to create these images of different formations, even with the disparate scale, so here's hoping PNSO chooses to round out different formations as they continue to bolster their catalog. And that was Anthony, PNSO's new Styracosaurus, and overall, I absolutely love this model. The sculpt work is immaculate, and the paint job is quite nice even with its limitations. I definitely dig this one, and I don't doubt that you will too. It seems every time PNSO makes a new figure of a certain group, I find myself wondering how they could possibly outdo themselves. And every time they come back around, they somehow manage to wow me even more. Even though I could do without the ever-steepening price tags, if they keep making stuff this good in the prehistoric animal line, I think I'll find a way to go. But as always, I want to know what you guys think of this figure. Do you own it yet? Are you planning on picking it up? What is your favorite Styracosaurus offering on the market? And what has been your favorite Ceratopsian from PNSO so far? Drop a comment down below with all of your thoughts, and thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the review, and if you did, be sure to stay tuned for even more PNSO goodness coming your way. Until then, take care out there, and bye-bye.